So we're looking at the last transformation. We have seen translation, we've seen dilation. Remember, translation, things move sideways, up and down. Dilation, things got bigger or smaller. We saw reflection where things flip, right? There was a mirror line and we flip on the other side. Now we're going to be looking at rotation. We're going to read this as rotation of 90 clockwise. I see rotation of 180, and we're going to see this as 90 counterclockwise. Notice how my notes, the CW says clockwise, CCW is counterclockwise. All right, so what does rotation mean? All right, you guys see my notes here. And I can go under view and I can rotate this 90 degrees clockwise. Look, everything flipped. Everything flipped sideways. There's 90 clockwise. Now, if I flip it again, let me rotate this again. Well, it looks like things are upside down, right? That's 180. Let me flip this 90 more. That's 270 clockwise. Notice I'm going with the clock, the way the clock moves. So that's 270. And if I rotate this 90 more, I come back to how it was to begin with. Now, interesting part is, remembered, let me come view. This is how 270 clockwise looked like, right? I just showed you guys a few seconds ago. This is how 270 clockwise looked like. But the funny thing is, let me come back to the original. If I go under view, I'm gonna go rotate, you guys can see. And if I go counterclockwise, so 90 degrees counterclockwise looks like this. So this was 270 degrees clockwise, but I can also call it 90 degrees counterclockwise. So if you guys ever see 270 degrees clockwise, well, that's the same thing as 90 counterclockwise. All right, so we already saw what rotation looks like, right? Things are going to rotate. That's how people say it. Now, let's take a look at our work. For today's work, oh, before I move on to our today's notes, rotation. This is our special cases. 90 clockwise, 180 degrees, and counterclockwise. I'm always going to rotate about the origin. The origin is the points where the X and the Y axis intersect, the points where they meet. All right, so this is very, very important. So let's take a look now at our work. For today's work, I'm going to be working questions 66 through 71. So looking at question number 66. Graph the image using the transformation given. Now, in reality, I'm actually going to use our formula. I look at our notes, 180 degrees, rotation of 180 degrees. According to my notes, it says, when I said looking at my notes, I'm using question number 51 from our notes. So rotation of 180 degrees, our note says XY. Again, I'm getting this from question 51. XY become negative X, negative Y. I'll use that in a minute, okay? For right now, what I'm going to do, let me just get the coordinates of the points that I have. So I'm gonna get the coordinates of G. I look at my point G, and the coordinates are -4, +1. The coordinates of F, like I said, I'm getting the points that I have right now. That's an F. Let me fix my F. My coordinates of F right now are 0, 1. Coordinates of E is 2, -1. And the coordinates of H is a -1, -3. Now, let me show you guys how this thing's done using a formula. XY become -X, -Y. Like, take a look. What happened? It was XY, and now it became -X, -Y. The only thing that happened was that I changed the signs of my letters. So for my G prime, my coordinates of G prime, I'm gonna get 4, -1. All I did was I changed the sign, right? From a negative, I moved it to a positive. And from a positive, I moved it to a negative. So when it comes on the sign on my notes, you guys see how it says -x, -y? It doesn't necessarily mean make them negatives. It means that little minus in front of my x or the minus in front of the y, it means switch the sign. Mathematically speaking, the negative of a negative becomes positive. So you are going to just switch the signs. If I'm looking at f and I want to get the coordinates of f prime, now there's no such thing as a -0. So I'm going to keep this as 0, -1. Technically, I switch the signs, but again, there's no such thing as a -0. So it's just 0. E prime, my coordinates of E prime will be -2, +1. And my coordinates of H prime will be 1, 3. The homework, all I'm asking you guys is give me the coordinates of the point given. So good. If I ask for G prime, just give me the coordinates of G prime. If I ask for F prime, E prime, or H prime, you guys know what to do. But in this case, on my notes, the instruction says graph. So I'm actually gonna graph this. Point 4, -1, it's right here. That's G prime. 0, -1 is right there. That's F prime. -2, 1. That's my point E prime. And the point 1, 3, that's H prime. If you rotate the black image, you rotate it 180 degrees. Yeah, that's basically what you guys are going to get. Homework wise, again, I'm just going to ask for the coordinates of one point. Notes wise, so right now for the notes, yeah, I will ask you to give me all of them and graph them. I can ask you guys to graph on the notes, so that's why I'm just going to ask for the coordinates of 1 point. All right, let's take a look at question number 67. Let me get the points that I have at the moment. So my original points, I see D, the coordinates of D are -3, +1. The coordinates of E are 0, -2. The coordinates of F is -2, -4. And the coordinates of C is -4, -3. Now I look at my notes. Now rotation 90 clockwise. Remember that one, I'm going to see it as 90 CW. It says XY. I'm looking at my notes. It's question 51. It says XY will become Y -X. Okay, so what does this mean? All right, take a look at it. XY becomes Y -X. What that means is that my numbers are going to flip, right? XY, YX, they're going to flip. But the number that was X to begin with, I'm going to switch the sign. So having that said, let's see. If I wanted to know the coordinates of D prime, my numbers are going to be 1, +3. Notice the X and the Y, the values switch order. And notice that -3, I change it to +3. Only the value that was X to begin with. All right, so now point E, E prime, will become -2, 0. I flip them, but again, there's no such thing as a -0, so just -2, 0. F prime, my values would be -4, +2. Notice the only one that switched sign was the 2. Right? From negative became positive. And lastly, the coordinates of C prime will be -3, +4. Let me plot these points. -2, 0, that's E prime. So here's my E prime. My F prime is -4, +2. And C prime is -3, +4. Now it looks like I rotated the image 90 degrees clockwise. Okay. Take a look at question 68. Again, I'm going to 71. That's where I'm going to stop. Let me get the coordinates of the points to begin with. It doesn't matter which order. So let me start with R. It doesn't matter which one. So I have, this is -2, 4. Point S is -2, 2. And point Q is -5, 2. Again, it doesn't matter which one I start with. I look at my notes. So question 51. And I'm looking at 90 degrees counterclockwise. So my notes, it says 90 CCW, 90 counterclockwise. According to the notes, it says XY will become -YX. So my numbers are going to flip, but I'm going to switch the sign on the Y value. So if I want to know the values of R prime, it's going to become -4, -2. Notice the only one that switched the sign was the 4. S prime, the coordinates of S prime will be -2, -2, and the coordinates of Q prime will be -2, -5. I'm not going to graph it this time, but this is what you guys do. Remember, here I'm giving you guys the letter, but in your homework, you're supposed to type in the numbers only. Okay? You don't have to type R prime, S prime, or Q prime. I'm actually asking for a specific point. So if I ask R prime, just give me the coordinates of R prime. Okay, or S prime or Q prime, whichever one I ask. Now let's take a look at question number 69. Let me get the coordinates to begin with, the original points, the original value. So G, the values of G is -4, 5. H is -2, 5. E is -3, +2. And F is -5, +4. Now I look at my notes, 90 clockwise, right? I'm looking at question 51, 90 clockwise, that is 90 CW. And that one says XY will become, right, 90 clockwise, it says XY will become Y -X. So if I want to know the values of G prime, the coordinates of G prime, my value will be 5, 4. Notice I switched the sign on the 4, right? It was negative. I made it into positive. Notice that. H prime, the values of H prime will be 5, 2. Notice I switched the sign on the 2. E prime will become 2, 3. And lastly, F prime will become 4, 5. Again, I'm not gonna graph it, but you guys get the idea. You guys can plot the points and you guys will see that it looks like the image rotated 90 clockwise. Now let's take a look at the last two examples, 70 and 71. Question 70 and 71, I give you guys the coordinates only. So I'm gonna do rotation 90 degrees clockwise. I look on my notes, question 51, right on my notes, rotation 90 CW, rotation 90 clockwise. According to the notes, that thing says XY becomes Y negative X. So the value of the X, I'm going to switch the sign and the numbers flip. So what do I mean with that is G prime going to become 1, 0. There's no such thing as a negative 0. So it's just 1, 0. F prime is going to be forward negative 1. Notice I switched the sign on the 1. Let me fix this F. E prime forward negative 2. D prime 0 negative 3. Numbers how my numbers switched. My numbers flipped, right? The X and the Y value, they flip. And notice I switched the sign on the one that was X to begin with. There's no such thing as a 0. So in G prime, I didn't write 1 and a negative 0. I just wrote 1 and 0. Lastly, 90 counterclockwise. 90 counterclockwise on our notes that says 90 CCW. So 90 counterclockwise, that one says XY. I'm looking at question 51. XY becomes negative YX. So F prime will become 3 negative 1. Notice I switched the sign on the 3. G prime is going to become 0 negative 3. There's no such thing as a negative 0. H prime, I'm going to write this as 0, 1. And lastly, I prime, I'm going to write this as 1, 3. I was switching the values that were Y to begin with. Just on the zeros. There's no such thing as a negative 0. All right, let me zoom out. That way you guys can take a screenshot of what we worked on today. And there you go.